My name is Stella Ingram. I'm 22 years old. Don't clap. I paid for that degree, not her, my father screamed from the bleachers, in front of 2,000 people, the moment I finished my valedictorian speech at Millbrook State University. I want you to hold that image. A man in a navy blazer, standing in a sea of sitting families, his voice cracking off the gymnasium walls, while his own daughter stood at the podium with shaking hands and a gold honor cord she'd bought herself. 2,000 people went silent. My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. But here's what my father didn't know. I'd worked 3 jobs for 4 years. I'd paid every cent of what he claimed was his. And the dean, sitting 6 feet from me on that stage, already had a file on her desk with his signature on 8 checks he was never supposed to cash. He thought he was taking credit. He was actually confessing. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, let me take you back 6 years. To the fall I was 16, the last week I still had my mother. My mother, Margaret Ingram, was a high school biology teacher who could make cellular mitosis sound like a love story. She's the reason I fell for science. Every evening after dinner, she'd sit with me at our small kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg she kept promising to fix, and we'd go through my homework together. Our refrigerator was wallpapered with my report cards, my science fair ribbons, my honor roll certificates. She taped every single one up herself. Our house was nothing fancy. A 3-bedroom on a quiet street in the suburbs of Dayton, Ohio, with a kitchen that always smelled like chicken broth and a backyard that needed mowing. But my mother made it feel like the safest place in the world. My father, Gerald, was a different presence. He worked as an insurance adjuster. Decent salary, steady hours. And he considered himself the provider, the man of the house. He never came to parent-teacher conferences. "That's women's work," he'd say, and my mother would press her lips together and go alone. He controlled the family finances down to the grocery budget. My mother had a small checking account of her own, her independence money, she called it, a quiet rebellion she never talked about at dinner. In the fall of my junior year, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. She'd never smoked a day in her life. The universe doesn't care about fairness. She lasted 11 weeks after the diagnosis. In those final weeks, while I sat beside her hospital bed doing calculus homework so she could watch, she loved watching me work. She said something I didn't understand until years later. "You'll go to college, sweetheart. I've already taken care of it." I thought she meant spiritually. I thought she was giving me permission to dream. She had an old laptop, a battered Dell with a cracked hinge, that I packed into a box after the funeral and couldn't bring myself to open for years. That laptop would change everything. But I didn't know that yet. My mother died on a Tuesday. The kitchen went quiet after that. The week after the funeral, my father moved fast. He closed my mother's personal checking account, her independence money, and rolled everything into his own. He gathered her mail, her documents, her files into a single box he kept in his office closet. "I'll handle the paperwork from now on," he said, standing in the hallway with a stack of envelopes. "All the mail comes through me first. I don't want you worrying about bills." I was 16. My grandparents on both sides were gone. I had no siblings, no aunts or uncles nearby. Just one great-aunt, Helen, who lived 3 states away and sent birthday cards with $10 bills. Gerald Ingram was the only family I had left. When your world shrinks to one person, you don't question the terms. He restructured the house the way he restructured claims at work, efficiently, without consulting anyone. The dining table went from 3 chairs to 2. He sat at the head. I cleared the plates. My mother's reading chair moved to the garage. Her coat disappeared from the hook by the door. "A girl your age should know how to run a household," he told me one evening while I scrubbed a pot. "Your mother did it. Now it's your turn." I cooked dinner every night. I cleaned the bathrooms on Saturdays. I ironed his shirts on Sundays. I told myself this was grief, his way of coping. I told myself he'd soften. He didn't. And somewhere in that period, in those months when I was too deep in mourning to pay attention to anything but survival, letters started arriving from colleges and scholarship foundations. Letters addressed to me. My father collected the mail every afternoon at 4:15. I never saw a single one. Senior year, I applied to Millbrook State University, a solid public research school about 4 hours from home. I wrote my application essays at the kitchen table after dishes, the same spot my mother used to sit with me. I got in. When the acceptance email came to my school address, I printed it out and brought it home like a trophy. My father read it at the table, chewing his dinner, and set it down next to his plate. "All right," he said. "I'll allow it." Allow it. Like college was a favor, not my future. Then came the conditions. He sat me down that weekend with a legal pad. The man loved legal pads, and laid out the terms. He would cover the big costs. In return, I'd contribute $800 a month from a job. Your share, he called it. I'm not raising someone who thinks the world owes her something. $800 a month felt enormous, but I nodded. He was paying the rest, after all. That's what he told me. That's what I believed. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for 3 more years, was that there was no rest. There was no tuition bill with Gerald Ingram's name on it. A full-ride scholarship had already covered every cent. He told our relatives a different story. At a family barbecue that summer, I overheard him holding court by the grill, beer in hand. "Nobody handed me anything. I'm paying for that girl's future out of my own pocket. That's what a real father does." Everyone nodded. Someone clapped him on the back. That fall, he drove me to campus in his new Ford F-150. Bought that spring with cash. "End-of-year bonus," he'd said. I didn't think to question it. I should have. Freshman year, I became 3 people. Mornings, I was a chemistry tutor at the campus learning center. $15 an hour, mostly freshmen who couldn't balance equations. Afternoons between classes, I worked the circulation desk at the university library. A federal work-study position that paid minimum wage but let me study during slow shifts. Weekends, I pulled catering shifts for a company called Silverleaf Events. White shirt, black slacks, sore feet, carrying trays of crab cakes for people wearing shoes that cost more than my monthly rent. 18 credit hours, 3 jobs, 4 to 5 hours of sleep on a good night. My sneakers wore through at the soles by October. I taped them with duct tape and kept going because there was no alternative. My GPA at the end of the first semester, 3.97. By spring, 3.95. I made the dean's list both terms. Every month on the 1st, I transferred $800 to my father's account. He never thanked me. He never asked how I was doing. Our Sunday phone calls followed the same script. "Did you send it?" "Yes." "Good." Click. Once, just once, I called to tell him I'd made the dean's list. There was a pause on the line and then, "It's just a list, Stella. Call me when you have a real job." I hung up and stared at the wall of my dorm room for a long time. My roommate, Rachel Torres, a sociology major from Phoenix with a laugh that could fill a stadium, looked at me from her bed and said, "You okay?" "Fine," I said. I wasn't fine. But I didn't know yet just how far from fine things actually were. I was breaking my body to pay a debt that didn't exist, and the man collecting it was spending the real money on patio furniture. Sophomore year, parents' weekend. My father came to campus for the first and only time. I'd been nervous about it for weeks. Not because I was ashamed of my life, but because I'd started to notice that my life didn't look like someone whose father was paying for everything. My dorm room was sparse. My wardrobe was thrift store. I ate ramen 3 nights a week. But I'd arranged a campus tour, reserved a table at the dining hall, even ironed a blouse I'd found at Goodwill so I'd look put together. Gerald arrived in his F-150 wearing a Ralph Lauren polo, aviator sunglasses, and the confidence of a man who believed his own mythology. I introduced him to Professor Diana Colton, my academic advisor, a sharp, patient woman in her mid-40s who'd taken an interest in my research. "So you're the one filling her head with lab work," my father said, shaking her hand too firmly. Professor Colton smiled politely. "Stella is one of the strongest students in the department." Gerald laughed. The kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh. "You think a science degree is going to help her? I keep telling her. Find a good man, settle down. but she wants to play scientist. He leaned in, like he was sharing a confidence. On my dime. The silence lasted about 2 seconds, but I felt every millisecond. Professor Colton's eyes flickered to me. I looked at the floor. Later, walking me back to my dorm, she asked quietly, "Is your father always like that?" "He's old-fashioned," I said. She nodded, but I could see her thinking. A student working 3 jobs whose father claims he's paying for everything. A father who doesn't want his daughter to use her degree. Something wasn't adding up, and Diana Colton was the kind of woman who noticed when numbers didn't balance. The Sunday calls got worse sophomore year. They followed a pattern so predictable I could have scripted them. He'd open with money. "Did you send it?" Then he'd pivot to guilt. "Your mother's gone, Stella. I'm the only one left. Do you know what I sacrificed to keep you in that school?" And he'd close with control. "You owe me. Don't forget that." Every Sunday. Same rhythm, same words, like a liturgy he'd memorized. Rachel started noticing. She'd be on her bed pretending to read while I sat on mine with the phone pressed to my ear, answering in monosyllables. After I hung up, she'd watch me go into the bathroom and close the door. She never said anything about the fact that I always turned the faucet on. She knew what the sound of running water was covering. One Sunday in November, Gerald asked for more. "Send an extra $200 this month. The furnace needs work." $200 I didn't have. I skipped meals for 2 weeks, told Rachel I was intermittent fasting, and wired it. Meanwhile, Gerald was telling his friends a story about sacrifice. I know this because his buddy Frank Murdoch mentioned it to me at Christmas. "Your dad talks about you all the time, honey. Says you're costing him an arm and a leg, but he wouldn't have it any other way." I smiled. What else could I do? But Rachel, who paid less per semester than I did, and whose parents contributed nothing, sat me down one night with the bluntness only a true friend can manage. "Stella, you pay your dad $1,000 a month and he says he's paying your tuition? You work 3 jobs, I work 0. Something doesn't add up." I told her she was overthinking it. But the seed was there, and seeds, given enough time, tend to crack concrete. Thanksgiving, sophomore year. I drove home in a borrowed car and started cooking at 5 in the morning. Gerald had invited about 15 people, cousins, old neighbors, a few work friends. He bought a turkey from Whole Foods and had me plate it on our nicest dish so it looked homemade. "Don't tell anyone I didn't cook it," he said, and I thought, everything about you is performance. By 6 p.m., the house was full. I'd made the sides from scratch: mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cornbread, 2 pies. My hands smelled like sage and my back ached from standing since dawn. Gerald sat at the head of the table in a pressed button-down, playing patriarch. Before anyone touched their food, he raised his glass. "This year, I'm spending over $30,000 to put Stella through school. Who else can say that? But that's what a father does." Applause. Actual applause. My cousin's husband whistled. I sat with my hands in my lap. An aunt leaned over and asked what I was studying. I began to explain my biochemistry research, an enzyme inhibition project I was genuinely proud of. I got about 2 sentences in before Gerald cut across the table. "Research." He said the word like it tasted bad. "My money, her hobby." Laughter. A few uncomfortable ones, but laughter. I pressed my napkin into my thigh under the table so hard my knuckles went white. Later, while I washed dishes alone in the kitchen, my great-aunt Helen appeared beside me. She dried a plate in silence for a moment, then said, very quietly, "Your mother would be so proud, sweetheart. She tried so hard to make sure you'd be taken care of. You know that, right?" I didn't know what she meant. Not yet. "Thank you, Aunt Helen," I said. She patted my hand and didn't say anything else. But the look on her face, something between sadness and apology, stayed with me long after I drove back to campus. By the end of sophomore year, my GPA was a perfect 4.0. Dean's List for the 4th consecutive semester. Professor Colton nominated me for an undergraduate research position in the molecular biology lab, a spot that usually went to juniors and seniors. I got it. I called Gerald on a Sunday, bracing for the usual script. Instead, he surprised me. "Good," he said. One word. But from him, it felt like a standing ovation. I hung up and caught myself smiling in the mirror. Actually smiling. and hated that one syllable of lukewarm approval from this man could still make me feel like I'd won something. What I didn't know was why he was in a good mood. The Pemberton Scholars Foundation had just deposited the fall semester disbursement, $15,500, into the joint account. My father was having a very good week. That summer, I went home for 2 weeks before picking up extra catering shifts. The first thing I noticed, a new patio set in the backyard. Wrought iron, glass-top table, 6 chairs, the kind of set you see in home magazines. "When did you get this?" I asked. "Treat myself once in a while," he said. "Lord knows I deserve it." I spent that summer eating instant noodles in my dorm and picking up double shifts. Gerald sat on his new patio and drank iced tea. The second thing I noticed, and this one actually hurt, my bedroom was gone. He'd turned it into a den. Flat-screen TV mounted on the wall where my bookshelf used to be, a leather recliner where my bed had been. My things, books, photos, the box of my mother's belongings, were stacked in the garage. "You have a room at school," he said when I stood in the doorway. "You don't need to." I slept on the couch that night, and I didn't come home again for a very long time. Junior year changed everything, and it started with a broken hinge. When Gerald had cleared out my bedroom, he'd moved my mother's old Dell laptop into a box in the garage along with everything else. During my brief summer visit, I'd rescued it, shoved it in my duffel bag without really thinking. It had been sitting in my closet at school for 2 years. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Turning it on felt like hearing her voice, and I wasn't ready. But that October, I needed a backup computer. My own laptop had crashed during midterms, and I couldn't afford a replacement. So I carried the Dell to the campus IT help desk and asked if they could get it running. 3 days later, the tech called me. "Got the hard drive recovered. Everything's on there." I took it back to my dorm room, waited until Rachel left for class, sat on my bed with the laptop open on my knees and my mother's desktop staring back at me. Her wallpaper was a photo of the two of us at the state fair, age 12, cotton candy on my chin. I opened her email. Most of it was ordinary. Newsletters, school correspondence, a thread with Aunt Helen about a recipe. But in the drafts folder, I found it. An email to the Pemberton Scholars Foundation, dated March 14th, 3 months before she died. Attached, a completed application for the Pemberton Scholars Award, a full-ride merit scholarship worth $31,000 per year. The application was for me. Below the draft, in her sent folder, a confirmation reply from the foundation. "Dear Mrs. Ingram, we have received your application on behalf of Stella M. Ingram. You will be notified of our decision by August 1st. My mother was dying, and she spent her last weeks filling out scholarship applications from a hospital bed. I read it 4 times. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. She said she'd taken care of it. She meant it literally. But if I'd been awarded this scholarship, where was the money? The next morning, I walked into the financial aid office at 8 a.m. sharp and sat across from a counselor named Linda. My voice was steady, but my hands were gripping the strap of my bag so hard my fingers ached. "I have a question," I said. "Has any scholarship ever been awarded in my name?" Linda typed, clicked, scrolled. Then she looked up with an expression I couldn't read. "Yes, the Pemberton Scholars Award. Full-ride merit scholarship. $31,000 per academic year, currently in its 3rd year of disbursement." The room tilted. "Disbursement," I repeated. "To whom?" "To the student account linked to your file. The account is in your name, Stella M. Ingram, with an authorized co-signer." She read the name from the screen. "Gerald R. Ingram." I don't remember what my face did, but Linda leaned forward. "Miss Ingram? Are you all right?" I wasn't all right. I was doing math. 4 semesters at $15,500 each, plus 2 more already processed. 6 disbursements so far, totaling over $90,000, deposited into an account my father had opened when I was 17. An account I'd never seen a statement for. An account he told me was for emergencies. "Has any of that money been applied to my tuition?" I asked. Linda checked. "Your tuition has been paid in full each semester by the scholarship disbursement." "So the tuition is covered. 100%, plus a stipend for books and living expenses." I sat back. 3 jobs, $800 a month sent to my father. The meals I'd skipped, the shoes I'd taped together, all of it. For a bill that didn't exist. $124,000 to date. And I hadn't seen a single cent. Thank you, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. I walked out of that office and sat on a bench outside the administration building for 45 minutes, watching students walk past with their backpacks and their coffee cups, and I felt the entire architecture of my life rearrange itself. Sunday came. The phone rang at its usual time. "Month's almost over," Gerald said. "Send it early. I need new tires." I was sitting on my bed. Rachel was in the library. The dorm room felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. "Okay," I said. My voice cracked on the second syllable, barely, a hairline fracture, and I held my breath waiting to see if he'd notice. He didn't. He never listened closely enough to notice. "And Stella? Don't be late. I shouldn't have to remind you every month." "I won't be late." "Good." He hung up. I set the phone face down on my mattress and walked to the bathroom. I turned on the shower, the old trick, the one Rachel pretended not to know about, and I sat on the tile floor and let 6 years of obedience crack open. I cried until my ribs hurt. Not because I was sad, because I was furious. Because every hour I'd spent shelving library books at $7.25 an hour, every Saturday night carrying champagne flutes for strangers in ballrooms, every calculus problem I'd solved at 2 a.m. between shifts, all of it had been built on a lie. He hadn't paid a single dollar toward my education. My dying mother had secured my future from a hospital bed, and my father had stolen it and called it his own. When Rachel came home, she found me on my bed, dry-eyed, with a legal pad in my lap. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said. For the first time I told the truth when someone asked me that question. I sent him the $800 that month. It was the last $800 he would ever get from me, but I didn't confront him. Not yet. A confrontation without proof is just a fight, and fights with Gerald Ingram were designed to be lost. I needed evidence. I needed someone with authority. I needed the dean. I went to Professor Colton first. I sat in her office, bookshelves floor to ceiling, a framed periodic table behind her desk, the faint smell of black coffee, and told her everything. The scholarship, the joint account, the $800 a month, the 3 jobs, all of it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took off her glasses, set them on a stack of papers, and said, "I've been wondering about this since Parents' Weekend." "You have?" "A student working 3 jobs whose father claims he's paying full tuition. I ran the numbers in my head after I met him. They didn't fit." She put her glasses back on. "Stella, what you're describing is scholarship fraud. This isn't a family disagreement. You need to talk to the dean." 2 days later, I was sitting across from Dean Patricia Hartwell in her office on the 4th floor of the administration building. She was a tall woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of calm authority that made you feel like the building itself was listening. I told her what I'd found. She asked the financial aid office to pull Gerald's full disbursement history. Within a week, they had it. 8 checks, 1 per semester, each signed by Gerald R. Ingram, each deposited into the joint account. Not a single dollar had been redirected to me or applied beyond the automatic tuition payment. The stipend for books and living expenses, thousands of dollars per semester meant to support me, went straight into his pocket. Dean Hartwell closed the folder and looked at me. "Miss Ingram, I want you to understand. What you're describing isn't a family disagreement. It's theft." She told me the university would open a formal internal investigation. She told me to keep everything confidential. "If your father learns he's under review, he may destroy evidence or move funds. We need to be thorough." I nodded. I could be thorough. I'd been surviving on thoroughness for years. The last year of college was the hardest thing I've ever done, not academically, but emotionally. I knew the truth now. Every Sunday phone call, every guilt trip, every "you owe me" landed differently when you knew the man saying it had stolen $124,000 from his dead wife's last wish. But I had to play the part. Dean Hartwell's instructions were clear. Act normal. Don't tip him off. So I sent the money. I answered the calls. I said, "Yes, Dad," when every cell in my body wanted to scream the truth across the phone line. Gerald, meanwhile, was tightening the screws. He started demanding I come home once a month. To check in, he said, which meant to check up. He still had access to my original bank account, and he'd review my transactions like an auditor. "What's this $40 at Target? What do you need books for? Doesn't the school have a library?" He also started planning my post-graduation life, without asking me. "You'll move back home after you finish," he said during one of his Sunday calls. "Get a job nearby. Secretary, receptionist, something sensible. I didn't pay for you to run off and play scientist in some other city." He actually emailed me a list. Receptionist, dental hygienist, administrative assistant, insurance clerk. Not a single research position. Not one. Behind the scenes, I made my own moves. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, one Gerald didn't know about. I started routing my paychecks there. I contacted the university's legal services office and began the process of removing Gerald as authorized signer on my student account. One afternoon, Gerald called the financial aid office directly, asking about my daughter's tuition status. The staff, briefed by Dean Hartwell, gave him a vague, cheerful runaround. He hung up satisfied. He had no idea the walls were closing in. In April of my senior year, the provost's office sent me a letter. I'd been named class valedictorian, highest GPA in the graduating class, 4.0 cumulative summa cum laude with departmental honors in biochemistry. I held that letter in my hands and felt two things collide. Pride so fierce it burned, and terror so deep it made my knees soft. Because being valedictorian meant giving a speech, in front of everyone, in front of him. Gerald's reaction was immediate and predictable. He called within hours of hearing, I still don't know who told him, and his voice had the oily warmth he only used when he wanted something. "You're giving a speech? Good. You'll thank me, in front of the whole crowd. Make sure you say my name clearly. Gerald Ingram. I want everyone to hear who made this possible." "Of course, Dad." That night, I sat at my desk and wrote two speeches. The first was the fake, a polished, grateful ode to fatherly sacrifice, full of phrases like, "I couldn't have done this without my father's unwavering support." I emailed it to Gerald. He read it, approved it, and replied with a single line, "Finally, about time you showed some respect." The second was real. I'm not going to tell you what was in it yet, but I will tell you this. It didn't contain my father's name. Not once. I printed both versions. The fake went into an envelope labeled, "Speech, Approved." The real one went into the inside pocket of my graduation gown, folded twice, pressed flat against my heart. Every night for the next 3 weeks, I practiced in front of the bathroom mirror while Rachel sat on the closed toilet lid and listened. Most nights, she cried, "I didn't. I'd used up my tears in the shower a long time ago." The graduation gown hung on the back of my door. I looked at it every night before I turned off the light. That black fabric, that gold honor cord. And I thought, this is mine. All of it. Every thread. 3 weeks before commencement, Dean Hartwell called me to her office. The folder on her desk was thick, maybe 40 pages. She opened it and turned it so I could see. 8 disbursement records, each with Gerald's signature. Bank routing confirmations. A spreadsheet showing every deposit, every date, every amount. $124,000 across 4 years, methodically collected by a man who told everyone, including his own daughter, that he was the one making sacrifices. "The investigation is complete," Dean Hartwell said. "Every disbursement from the Pemberton Scholars Award was deposited into a joint account opened by your father when you were 17. He signed for each check as the authorized co-signer. No funds beyond automatic tuition payment were ever transferred to you." She paused, letting that land. "Additionally, your employment records confirm that you earned approximately $38,000 across 3 jobs over 4 years and sent a significant portion of that to your father as what you believe to be your tuition contribution. $38,000, earned at $15 an hour, at minimum wage, at weekend catering rates, every cent of it sent to a man who was already sitting on a full-ride scholarship. The university has referred this matter to the county district attorney's office, Dean Hartwell continued. Formal action will begin after commencement. We didn't want anything to interfere with your graduation day. Campus security will also be briefed about your father, in case he causes a disruption. Then she pulled something from the bottom of the folder. A single sheet, a printout of a letter the Pemberton Foundation had included with the original award notification. A handwritten letter from my mother, submitted with the application. I recognized her handwriting before I read a word. Dean Hartwell slid it across the desk. Your mother wrote this from her hospital bed. I thought you should have it. I read it. I won't share every word. Some things belong only to the people they were written for. But she wrote that she didn't know if she'd live to see me graduate, and she wanted to make sure I'd have the chance she never had. She wrote that I was the bravest person she'd ever known. My mother wrote that letter while dying. My father cashed the check it earned. I folded it carefully, put it in my bag, and said, Thank you, Dean Hartwell. You've earned more than a thank you, Stella. You've earned that stage. The final week was methodical. I treated it like a lab protocol. Steps in order, nothing skipped, no room for emotion to derail the process. Step 1. I practiced the real speech every night. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, hands flat on the sink, speaking to my own reflection until the words stopped feeling dangerous and started feeling true. Rachel sat cross-legged on the bath mat each time, nodding, occasionally wiping her eyes. You sure about this? She asked on Tuesday night. No, I said, but I'm done being sure about staying quiet. Step 2. With guidance from the university's legal services, I officially closed the joint account Gerald had controlled. The process required documentation, my signature, my ID, confirmation of student status. The bank representative asked if I wanted to notify the co-signer. No, I said. Step 3. I packed my dorm room. Everything I owned fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. 6 years of living lean had taught me to travel light. I didn't leave anything behind. Step 4. I wrote a letter to Gerald. Clear, factual, no emotion. It stated that I was aware of the Pemberton Scholars Award, the disbursements, and his interception of the funds. It requested full repayment and informed him that I would no longer be in contact. I sealed it in an envelope and dated it for the day after graduation. The gold honor cord cost $25. I'd asked Gerald to send me the money weeks earlier. He'd refused. What do you need a fancy rope for? So I bought it myself with tip money from a catering shift. I hung it on the doorknob of my empty dorm room and looked at it in the dark. On Friday, Rachel texted me. He bought plane tickets, and he made a dinner reservation at Morton's for after. 5 guests, his friends. She added a second text. He had invitations printed. Of course he did. The night before graduation, I was alone. Rachel had left that morning. Her family arrived early, and she'd moved to their hotel for the night. The dorm room was bare. 2 stripped mattresses, empty shelves, the kind of silence that only exists in rooms that used to be full. I sat on my bed, just the fitted sheet left, and opened my mother's laptop one last time. I'd been through the emails, the documents, the scholarship application. But that night I found something I'd missed. A photo, buried in a folder labeled Stella. A selfie my mother had taken of the 2 of us when I was 15. We were in the kitchen. Flour on the counter, a lopsided cake between us, both of us grinning like the world was small and safe. She was already thinner than she should have been. I didn't notice at the time. I touched the screen like I could reach through it. I'm graduating tomorrow, Mom, I said to the empty room. I earned it. Like you wanted. At 9 p.m., my phone rang. Gerald. Remember, he said, read the speech I approved. Wear something nice. My friends will be there. And Stella, his voice dropped into that register he used when he wanted to sound generous. This is a big day for both of us. For both of us. Yes, Dad, I said. The words tasted like ash. It was the last time I'd ever say yes to him. After we hung up, I ironed my graduation gown. Not because it was wrinkled, the fabric was fine, but because I needed something to do with my hands at 2 a.m. The iron hissed back and forth. Steam curled. On the desk beside me, my mother's photo, my graduation cap, and 2 folded speeches, one a lie, one the truth. I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling until the sky turned gray. 7 a.m. I put on the gown. The fabric was heavier than I expected, or maybe that was just the morning. I draped the gold honor cord across my shoulders and adjusted my cap in the mirror. The tassel hung to the right. After the ceremony, I'd move it to the left. That was the tradition. Right now, it stayed where it was. The auditorium at Millbrook State seats 2,200. When I arrived backstage at 8:15, I could already hear the low roar of families filling the bleachers, laughter, the squeak of folding seats, someone's toddler shrieking in delight. The stage was dressed for the occasion, university banners in navy and gold, a podium with the school seal, a long table with stacked diploma covers, rows of chairs for faculty in their academic regalia. Dean Hartwell found me in the staging area. She was wearing her doctoral robes, black with velvet chevrons, and she shook my hand with both of hers. "Everything is in place," she said quietly. "Security has been briefed. Just deliver your speech." Her eyes held mine, steady, an anchor. I looked out through the gap in the curtain. The auditorium was nearly full. 2,000 people, parents with cameras, siblings holding flowers, grandparents in their Sunday best. And there, dead center of the bleachers, Section C, row 12, my father. He was wearing a navy blazer with brass buttons, a red power tie. His hair was freshly cut. He looked like a man preparing to receive an award. Flanking him were 5 of his friends, men in their 50s, guys he played poker with, drank with, told stories to. The stories about his sacrifices, his money, his daughter. I noticed something on the empty seat beside him, a small card. I was too far away to read it, but later I'd learn what it said. Cordially invited to celebrate my daughter's graduation, made possible by Gerald Ingram. He'd had invitations printed, with his name larger than mine. Professor Colton, seated in the faculty section, caught my eye and gave me a single, firm nod. I touched the folded speech in my inside pocket, the real one, the one with truth in it. "Okay," I whispered, "to no one, to my mother. Let's go." Pomp and circumstance filled the auditorium like a wave. The processional began. I walked at the front, valedictorian's privilege, cap straight, shoulders back, gown brushing the floor. Behind me, 462 graduates filed in, 2 by 2, a river of black fabric and nervous grins. The audience rose, cameras flashed, parents craned their necks, scanning the line for their children. I kept my eyes forward, but I could hear Gerald, his voice carried like it always did, bellowing from the bleachers. "That's my daughter, right there, at the front." A few people around him smiled politely. His friends clapped. I climbed the stage steps and took my seat, the designated chair to the right of the podium, separated from the faculty row by a small table with a water pitcher and a glass. The stage felt enormous. Below me, 2,000 faces. Behind me, a banner. Millbrook State University, Commencement Ceremony, Class of 2025. The provost made opening remarks. A trustee read a citation. The university choir sang. I heard none of it. My pulse was a drumline. The folded speech in my pocket felt like it weighed 10 pounds. Then the MC, the associate dean, stepped to the podium. "It is my honor to introduce this year's valedictorian." Stella Ingram maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA over 4 years while working 3 concurrent jobs. She is graduating summa cum laude with departmental honors in biochemistry and has been awarded the university's highest academic distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, Stella Ingram. Working 3 concurrent jobs. I saw Gerald shift in his seat when the MC said it. His jaw tightened. That detail wasn't in the script he'd imagined. The one where his money made all of this possible and his daughter was simply talented enough to ride his generosity. I stood. I walked to the podium. I placed both palms flat on the wood. 2,000 people. Absolute quiet. I opened my mouth. 4 years ago, I said. I walked onto this campus with 2 suitcases, a used laptop, and 3 job applications already filled out. A few people chuckled. I wasn't joking, but it sounded like a humble beginning, the kind of opening audiences expect from valedictorians. It wasn't. It was the first line of the truth. I came here because of a woman who believed that education was the one thing no one could take from you. My mother, Margaret Ingram, was a high school biology teacher. She taught me that every equation has a solution, that every question deserves an honest answer, and that the hardest part of any experiment isn't the hypothesis. It's having the courage to look at the data. I paused. In the bleachers, a few parents were already dabbing their eyes. My mother's story wasn't complicated, a teacher who died too young. But it was real, and real things land differently than performance. She couldn't be here today, but everything I am started with her. I didn't look at Gerald when I said it. I didn't need to. I could feel him. I talked about the jobs, tutoring, the library, the catering shifts. I learned biochemistry in lecture halls, and I learned endurance in banquet kitchens. I served hors d'oeuvres at events where the napkins cost more than my weekly groceries. Every credit hour I earned twice. Once in the classroom, once on the clock. The audience was still, not uncomfortable, captivated. But in Section C, Row 12, something was changing. Gerald Ingram had come to this ceremony to hear his name, to hear his daughter thank him publicly on a microphone in front of his friends and 2,000 witnesses. He was waiting for the line he'd approved. I couldn't have done this without my father's unwavering support. It never came. I watched, from the corner of my eye as his posture stiffened. His hands gripped his knees, his smile curdled. The friends beside him exchanged glances. Something was about to break. It happened between sentences. I had just finished saying, "Every dollar I spent on this education, I earned myself," when a sound cut through the auditorium like a gunshot. A chair, metal, folding, slammed upright against the bleacher behind it. And then a voice I'd been obedient to for 22 years roared across 2,000 people. "Don't clap! I paid for that degree, not her!" Gerald was standing, blazer unbuttoned, face crimson, veins visible in his neck even from the stage. He jabbed a finger toward me like he was scolding a child in a grocery store. Except the grocery store had 2,000 witnesses and a sound system. "She wouldn't have lasted one semester without my money," he shouted. "Everything she has, I gave her. That gown, that cord, that podium, I paid for all of it." The auditorium went silent so fast, it felt like the air had been sucked out. Someone dropped a program. A baby started crying 3 sections over. 2,000 heads turned toward Section C, Row 12, toward a man in a navy blazer who had just detonated his own reputation and didn't know it yet. His 5 friends sat frozen. One of them, I'd learn later it was Frank Murdoch, slowly covered his face with his hand. I stood at the podium. The microphone was still on. I could hear my own breathing through the speakers, amplified, and I knew the audience could hear it too. My hands were trembling. I gripped the edges of the podium to stop them. My heart was slamming so hard I thought I might pass out. But I didn't cry. I looked down at the wood grain beneath my fingers. I looked at Dean Hartwell, seated to my left on the stage. She met my eyes and gave one nod, small, nearly imperceptible, but I saw it. I felt it. And I smiled. Not a wide smile, not a victorious one, the quiet kind. The kind that comes after you've been waiting for something to finally be over so the truth can start. I stepped back to the microphone. 7 words. I'd rehearsed them in the bathroom mirror for 3 weeks. I'd said them so many times they'd lost their shape and become pure sound, and then I'd said them more until they became something harder. Not just words, but a line drawn in the ground. I leaned into the microphone. My voice didn't shake. I paid for every cent myself. Silence. 3 full seconds of it. The kind of silence where you can hear the ventilation system humming. Then a murmur. Low at first, rippling through the audience like a stone dropped in water. Heads turning, eyebrows rising. People leaning toward each other. What did she say? Did you hear that? I kept going, steady, like reading data aloud in a lab. 3 jobs, 4 years, every tuition payment, every textbook, every meal. The financial records are on file with the dean's office. I turned slightly, not fully toward Gerald, but enough. And the Pemberton Scholars Award, the full-ride merit scholarship my mother applied for before she died, the one that covered my entire education? My voice stayed level. Those funds were intercepted and cashed by someone else. The disbursement records, with signatures, are also on file. I didn't say his name. I didn't need to. Every person in that auditorium knew who I was looking at. Gerald stood in the bleachers, mouth open, no sound coming out. The crimson drained from his face and left it gray. He looked like a man who had just heard a door lock behind him. The murmurs became a wave. I could hear fragments. Did she say stolen? The scholarship? Oh my God! In the far corner of the bleachers, my great-aunt Helen pressed both hands over her mouth and began to cry. Professor Colton, in the faculty section, didn't move. She just closed her eyes for a long moment, the way you do when something you suspected turns out to be true, and the confirmation hurts anyway. I stepped back from the microphone. You didn't pay for my degree, Dad. Quiet, clear, final. You stole from it. Dean Hartwell stood. She didn't rush. She didn't make a spectacle of it. She rose from her chair with the unhurried gravity of someone who had prepared for this moment and placed herself at the second microphone on the stage, the one reserved for administrative remarks. If I may, she said. Her voice was calm, authoritative, the kind of voice that fills a room without raising itself. 2,000 people turned back toward the stage. I can confirm that the university has completed an internal investigation into the disbursement of a merit-based scholarship awarded to Miss Ingram. The Pemberton Scholars Award, a full-ride scholarship valued at $124,000, was applied to Miss Ingram's tuition account each semester as intended. However, the accompanying stipend funds were deposited into a joint account with an authorized cosigner who was not the student. She paused. That matter has been referred to the appropriate authorities. She didn't say Gerald's name. She didn't need to. The entire auditorium knew who was standing in Section C, Row 12, because every head had already turned. 2 campus security officers, I noticed them only now, though they must have been positioned near the aisle before the ceremony began, were already moving. They walked calmly up the bleacher steps toward Gerald, one on each side. Sir, the first officer said, loud enough for the nearby rows to hear, please come with us. Gerald's face cycled through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, then rage, then something I'd never seen on him before, fear. This is my daughter's graduation, he sputtered. You can't. I have a right to be here. Sir, you're being asked to leave the venue. They flanked him, polite but immovable. Gerald looked around for his friends, the 5 men he'd invited to witness his triumph. Not one of them stood. Not one of them looked at him. Frank Murdoch sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Gerald was escorted down the bleacher steps, past rows of silent families, past mothers clutching their programs, past fathers who held their children a little tighter as he passed. The metal doors at the back of the auditorium opened and then closed, and the sound echoed through the silence like a period at the end of a sentence. On the empty seat in Section C, Row 12, a small printed card lay face up, made possible by Gerald Ingram. No one picked it up. The auditorium was still. Dean Hartwell stepped back from the microphone and nodded to me, a gesture that said, "This is still your stage." I returned to the podium. My hands were no longer shaking. Something had released in my chest, a knot I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. I'd like to finish, I said. 2,000 people gave me their silence. It felt different from the silence before, warmer, like the room was holding its breath not from shock, but from care. I reached into the inside pocket of my graduation gown and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the printout of my mother's letter to the Pemberton Foundation. I'd carried it against my heart through the processional, through the speech, through everything. When my mother applied for the scholarship that paid for my education, she was in the hospital. She had stage 4 lung cancer. She had weeks left. My voice caught, just barely, and I let it. She wrote a letter to the selection committee. I'd like to share part of it. I looked down at her handwriting, photocopied but still unmistakably hers, the slight forward lean of her cursive, the way she crossed her T's with long, confident strokes. She wrote, I don't know if I'll be alive when my daughter starts college, but I know she'll get there. I'm asking you to make sure she has the chance I won't be there to give her. Something broke open in that auditorium. I could hear it, a wave of emotion that moved through 2,000 people at once. Faculty members removed their glasses. Strangers reached for each other's hands. In the front row, a woman I'd never met was openly weeping. Professor Colton pressed a tissue to her eyes. Aunt Helen, in the back, was sobbing. Decades of guilt and suspicion finally given a name. I folded the letter. She couldn't walk me to campus, I said. So she paved the road instead. The standing ovation began in the faculty section and rolled outward like a tide. 2,000 people rose. The sound was enormous. Not just applause, but something louder than applause. Recognition, witness. I stood at the podium and let it wash over me. And for the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel like I was carrying anything alone. After the ceremony, after the diplomas were conferred, the tassels moved, the caps thrown, I walked into the reception area with my gown unzipped and my honor cord still around my neck. Classmates hugged me. Strangers shook my hand. A woman with tears still on her face said, "Your mother raised a warrior." And I held it together just barely. Then a man I didn't immediately recognize appeared at my elbow. He was in his late 50s, heavy-set, with thinning gray hair and the ruddy complexion of someone who spent weekends on a boat. He was wearing a sport coat that didn't quite fit, the sleeves too short, the buttons straining. One of Gerald's 5 guests. "Miss Ingram? I'm Frank Murdoch. I was a friend of your father's." "I know who you are, Mr. Murdoch." He couldn't look me in the eye. His gaze kept drifting to the floor, to the wall, anywhere. "I want you to know, I've had doubts for a while. Your dad always talked about how much he was sacrificing, how expensive you were, but last year he bought a fishing boat, cash, and I thought, where's that money coming from? An insurance adjuster?" He shook his head. "I didn't ask. I should have." He reached into his jacket and pulled out one of Gerald's custom invitations, the little card with "Made Possible by Gerald Ingram" in embossed lettering. He held it between 2 fingers, then tore it slowly in half and dropped the pieces into the nearest trash can. "I believed him for 20 years, Frank said. "That's on me." He offered his hand. I shook it. His grip was uncertain, almost apologetic. "He told us, you know. After you graduated, his plan was to have you manage a laundromat he was looking at buying." Frank's mouth twisted. A laundromat? For a girl who just graduated valedictorian in biochemistry. He walked away. No drama, no redemption arc, just a man who admitted he'd looked the other way and couldn't do it anymore. I watched him cross the parking lot alone. None of Gerald's other friends came to speak to me, but none of them went looking for Gerald either. 2 weeks after graduation, the machinery started turning. The county district attorney's office opened a formal case against Gerald Ingram. The charges: theft by deception, $124,000 in scholarship funds fraudulently intercepted over 4 years, and theft of services for the approximately $38,000 I'd earned and sent him under false pretenses. If he'd used the U.S. Postal Service to receive any of the disbursement checks, mail fraud charges were also on the table. My father's Sunday phone calls about sacrifice and duty had built a paper trail that now led to a prosecutor's desk. Millbrook State University issued a formal statement confirming that I had been the victim of scholarship diversion and that the matter had been referred to law enforcement. The university's emergency student fund reimbursed me $38,000, my 4 years of earnings, pending recovery from Gerald. It wasn't a gift. It was restitution through the institution, and they'd recoup it when the legal process concluded. The Pemberton Scholars Foundation responded with an announcement that they would implement direct-to-student disbursement protocols for all future awards. No more co-signed accounts, no more intermediaries. My case became the reason. Gerald hired a defense attorney. The retainer alone was reportedly north of $15,000. His fishing boat, the cash purchase Frank Murdoch had found suspicious, was identified as a potential asset for seizure. The new patio furniture, the F-150, the flat screen in my old bedroom, all purchased during the years the scholarship checks were landing. I didn't follow every development. I didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves, just as Dean Hartwell had promised. What I focused on instead was the offer letter sitting on my kitchen counter, a research associate position at a biotech lab in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. Starting salary, $65,000. Benefits: a 401k. My name on published papers. I signed it the same day I signed the lease on my first apartment. A studio with a window that overlooked a parking lot, which doesn't sound like much, but it was mine. Every square foot of it was mine. The call came a month later. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, the part that was still, after everything, a daughter, picked up. You destroyed me. Gerald's voice was flat, stripped of the bluster I'd grown up under. No warmth, no charm, no performance. Just a man talking from whatever room he was sitting in, alone. In front of everyone. In front of my friends. You humiliated me, Stella. I am your father. I was standing in my studio apartment. The evening light came through the window and fell across the kitchen counter where my offer letter sat, already signed. My mother's photo, the selfie from the kitchen, the one with flour and cake, was taped to the wall above my desk. You are my father, I said. That's exactly why this hurts. Everything I did was for you. You stole $124,000 from a scholarship Mom applied for while she was dying. You took $38,000 I earned working 3 jobs. You told me I owed you. You told everyone you sacrificed for me. None of it was true. I raised you. You didn't pay for my education. The records prove it, and I'm done arguing about facts. There was a silence on the line. Not the comfortable kind. Not the kind that means understanding. The kind that means a wall has been hit. You'll regret this, he said. You'll come back. No, I said. I won't. I ended the call. Set the phone on the counter, stared at it for a long time. This small rectangle that had carried 6 years of guilt trips and Sunday interrogations and demands. This tiny machine through which a man had controlled his daughter from 4 hours away. Then I blocked the number. I didn't cry. I'd done my crying. What I felt was something quieter and larger, like stepping out of a building you'd been locked inside for so long you forgot there was weather. I looked at my mother's photo on the wall. I'm okay, Mom, I said. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet I got to choose. 6 months later, I am someone I recognize. I work at the biotech lab. I wear a white coat with my name embroidered on the pocket, Stella Ingram, Research Associate, Department of Molecular Biology. And every morning when I clip my ID badge to my lanyard, I think about a girl taping her sneakers together with duct tape so she could carry champagne flutes across a ballroom. That girl got me here. I owe her everything. My apartment has furniture now. Not much, but mine. A desk from a secondhand store. A bookshelf I assembled myself. A small, succulent Rachel brought when she visited last month, still somehow alive despite my best efforts. She walked in, looked around at my 380 square feet, and said, "It's perfect." She meant it. I could tell because she wasn't crying. I started therapy. I resisted at first. I told myself I was fine. I'd handled it. It was over. But my therapist, Dr. Nolan, said something in our first session that I keep coming back to. Survival isn't the same as processing. You survived it. Now we need to let your nervous system know it's over. She's right. 6 years of hypervigilance doesn't just evaporate because you move to a new city. Aunt Helen calls every Sunday now. She apologized for not speaking up sooner. She'd suspected something for years but couldn't prove it and didn't want to overstep. I told her I understood. I did. Silence in the face of power is a survival strategy I know intimately. As for Gerald, last I heard, he was negotiating a plea deal with the DA. Probation, mandatory restitution, community service. His attorney was arguing that a prison sentence would make repayment impossible. I don't know the outcome. I don't check. That chapter closed the moment I stepped off that stage. I don't owe it any more of my attention. So, that's the story. If you've made it this far, I want to sit with you for 1 more minute. Not to lecture, not to give advice, just to tell you a few things I learned. The kind of things you can only learn by living through something you didn't choose. I used to believe that silence was loyalty, that enduring mistreatment from someone who was supposed to love you was the same as honoring them. It isn't. Silence in the face of injustice isn't respect. It's a prison you build around yourself, one yes, dad, at a time. The day I stopped saying yes was the day I started breathing. I also learned this. Keep your records, keep your emails, keep your pay stubs. Keep every piece of paper that tells the truth about your life, because there will come a day when someone tries to rewrite your story, and you'll need the receipts. Documents don't lie. People do. Let the paperwork speak. And maybe most importantly, setting a boundary with someone you love is not an act of war. It's an act of survival. I didn't cut my father out of my life because I hated him. I did it because I finally loved myself enough to stop letting him take what wasn't his. If you're in a situation like mine, if someone is using guilt or obligation or family as a tool to control you, know this: you are not alone. And you don't owe anyone your silence. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story touched something in you, hit that like button. Not for me, but so the algorithm carries it to someone who needs to hear it tonight. Subscribe and tap the bell if you want more stories like this one. And check the description. There's another one waiting for you that I think you'll understand. My name is Stella Ingram. I graduated from Millbrook State University, summa cum laude, with a 4.0 GPA, 3 jobs on my resume, and a full-ride scholarship my dying mother fought for. I earned every cent, and now the record shows it. My name is Dakota Ashford, and I'm 29 years old. Get out! I'm done paying for another man's mistake, my father said, throwing a $50 bill at my face on my 18th birthday, with my grandmother, my brother, and 6 relatives watching from the kitchen table. 11 years. That's how long I carried a sealed envelope with me. Through nursing school, through 12-hour shifts in the pediatric ward, through every Thanksgiving I spent alone. Inside was one piece of paper that could have ended everything. I never opened it in front of him, not because I was afraid, because I was waiting for the moment he couldn't look away. That moment came 6 months ago, at his 60th birthday party, in front of 80 guests, and when he finally saw what was inside, and who was standing at the door, his face turned a shade of gray I'd never seen on a living person. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're all listening from. Now let me take you back to a Saturday morning in April, the day my mother's brother showed up with a duffel bag and said 2 words that changed my life. My mother, Marlene, was the only reason our house ever felt like a home. She had this way of standing between me and my father without making it look like she was standing between me and my father. A hand on my shoulder when his voice got sharp, a change of subject when his eyes went cold. She was a buffer, soft, constant, invisible, until you realized she was gone. She died of ovarian cancer when I was 10. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 14, because that's the kind of woman she was. She fought for every extra Tuesday with us. Before she got sick, my father was already distant with me. He'd ruffle Tyler's hair at the dinner table, ask about his Little League games, carry him on his shoulders at the county fair. With me, it was different. Not violent, not loud, just empty. Like I was a tenant instead of a daughter. But he kept the mask on while she was alive. The week after her funeral, the mask came off. I remember the first time I heard him say it. He was on the phone with his brother, standing in the kitchen. He didn't know I was sitting on the stairs. She doesn't look like anyone in this family, Frank. Never has. I was 10. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I understood the tone. It was the tone of someone washing their hands. After that, it was small things at first. Tyler got new school clothes in August. I wore what the church donation bin had. Tyler got the bigger bedroom. I got moved to the room above the garage, where the heating vent didn't work right. Nana, my grandmother, would visit on Sundays. She'd slip a $20 bill into my jacket pocket when no one was looking and squeeze my hand too tight, like she was trying to say something with her fingers that she couldn't say with her mouth. It took me 20 years to understand what she was trying to tell me. By 14, the gap between Tyler and me wasn't a gap anymore. It was a canyon. Tyler got a brand new mountain bike for his 12th birthday. Red, 21 gears, a helmet to match. I asked my father for $40 to buy a used biology textbook. He didn't even look up from the television. "Ask your real father," he said. Tyler looked at me from across the room. He was 12, and even he knew that sentence was wrong. But he didn't say anything. He never did. I got a job washing dishes at Rosario's, the Italian place 3 blocks from our house. I was 15. The owner, Mrs. DeLuca, paid me $7 an hour under the table and let me eat leftover pasta after closing. That was my dinner most nights. Tyler went to soccer camp that summer. 2 weeks upstate, $400. My father drove him there himself, loaded the car with new cleats and a sleeping bag from Dick's Sporting Goods. I stayed home. I worked doubles at Rosario's. I bought my own school supplies. The thing about being the invisible child is that you learn to build a life out of scraps. You learn that nobody is coming to save you. You learn that silence is not peace. It's just the sound of everyone agreeing you don't matter. Nana still came on Sundays, still slipped me money. But now when she looked at me, her eyes had something else in them, something heavier than pity. It looked like guilt. She'd hold my face in both hands and whisper, "You're a good girl, Dakota. Don't you ever forget that." I didn't understand then why she said it like an apology, like she owed me something she couldn't give. I understand now. The day I turned 18, I baked my own cake. Funfetti, from a box. I'd bought it with tip money and made it after my shift at Rosario's. I set it on the kitchen counter, stuck a single candle in the center, and lit it with a match from the junk drawer. I wasn't expecting a party. I wasn't expecting anything. I just wanted to blow out one candle in my own house before I wasn't allowed to anymore. My father walked in through the back door. Work boots, Carhartt jacket, sawdust in his hair. He saw the cake. He saw the candle. He saw me standing there, alone, in the kitchen at 6:15 p.m. on my birthday. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a $50 bill, tossed it onto the counter like he was tipping a valet. "Happy birthday! Get out! I'm done paying for another man's mistake." Nana was on the sofa in the next room. I heard the creak of the cushion as she leaned forward, and then nothing. She didn't stand up. She didn't speak. Tyler was on the stairs. I saw his hand tighten on the railing. His mouth opened, then closed. Nobody said a word. I picked up the 50, folded it twice, put it in my back pocket, blew out the candle, and called Uncle Ray from the phone in the hallway. He showed up 40 minutes later in his blue Ford pickup, engine idling in the driveway. I walked out with one garbage bag of clothes and a pair of shoes that didn't fit right. I didn't look back. But I made a promise to myself on that porch. One day, he would know exactly what he threw away, and it would be too late. Uncle Ray lived above his auto repair shop on Kellner Road, a 2-bedroom apartment with water stains on the ceiling and a kitchen so small you had to turn sideways to open the fridge. He'd cleared out his storage closet before I got there. Put in a twin mattress, a desk lamp, and a folded quilt that smelled like motor oil and laundry detergent. It wasn't much. It was everything. "You're home now," he said, standing in the doorway. "That's all that matters." Ray was my mother's younger brother. He'd served 8 years in the Army, 2 tours overseas, and came back quieter than he left. He opened the shop with his separation pay, fixed cars 6 days a week, and lived alone. He never married, never talked about why. He didn't ask me what happened at the house. He didn't ask about Gary. He just pointed to the bathroom towels and told me breakfast was at 7. The first week, I barely talked. I went to school, came back, sat at the desk in my closet room and did homework until my eyes blurred. Ray left plates of food outside my door, grilled cheese, canned soup, once a whole rotisserie chicken he must have bought at the grocery store on the way home. On the 8th night, I came out and sat at the kitchen table while he ate. He looked up, nodded, went back to his sandwich. That was it. That was the whole conversation. But something in my chest unlocked. Just a little. I didn't know this then, but Ray had his own battles. I found the chip in his nightstand drawer a month later, a bronze medallion with a triangle stamped into it. 3 years sober. He'd quit drinking the year my mother died. He never told me. I never asked. He just showed up, every single day. Leaving my father's house didn't set me free. It just moved the cage. Because Gary Ashford didn't stop at the front door. He took his story on the road. Within a month of my leaving, I started noticing the silence. I called Aunt Patty, my mother's cousin, the one who used to braid my hair at Thanksgiving. No answer. I called Marcus, my older cousin who taught me to ride a bike. Voicemail, every time. I sent a card to Nana for her birthday. No reply. It was Ray who finally told me what was happening. Your father's been making calls, he said one night, wiping his hands with a shop rag. Telling people your mother confessed on her deathbed, saying Marlene admitted you weren't his. I felt the floor tilt. That's not true, I said. Ray's jaw clenched. I know it's not. Then why does everyone believe him? Because he's been saying it for years, and your mother's not here to say otherwise. That was the part that gutted me. Not that Gary lied. He'd been lying my whole life. It was that he weaponized my mother's death. Turned her last days into a confession she never made. Used her silence to rewrite history. And the family bought it. Because Gary was loud, and Gary was present, and Gary told the story first. If I stayed quiet, I lost everything. Not just a father. I'd already lost him. I'd lose my mother's name. Her reputation. The only proof she ever existed would be filtered through the mouth of the man who betrayed her. That was the real cost of silence. Not money, not inheritance. Marlene. But Gary made one mistake. He told that story to too many people, including someone who knew the truth. The call came 3 years after I left. I was 21, halfway through my nursing program, studying for a pharmacology exam at the kitchen table, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Dakota? It's Diane. Diane Mercer. I was your mother's best friend. I knew the name. I remembered a woman with red hair and a loud laugh who came to our house on Friday nights when I was little. She and my mother would sit on the porch with glasses of wine while my father watched football inside. I heard what your father's been telling people, Diane said. Her voice was tight, like she was holding something back with both hands. About your mother, about a deathbed confession. It's not true, I said. Sweetheart, I know it's not. I was at that hospital every single day. Your mother's last words were about you and Tyler. She never said anything about... Diane stopped, took a breath. Your mother was the most loyal woman I ever knew. Then she said something that rearranged every assumption I'd ever made. Your mother didn't have a secret, Dakota. But your father does. The kitchen went very quiet. What do you mean? When your mom was pregnant with you, she started suspecting Gary was seeing someone. She never had proof. But she told me, more than once, that he'd come home at strange hours, smelling like a perfume she didn't own. I sat back in my chair. The pharmacology textbook blurred. Diane, are you saying... I'm saying that if anyone had a reason to question anyone's loyalty, it wasn't him. She paused, then quieter. If you ever want the truth, science doesn't lie. You just need a sample. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in that kitchen for a very long time, staring at nothing. I waited a year before I acted. Not because I was hesitant, because I needed to be certain I was doing this for the right reason. I wasn't trying to win Gary back. I wasn't trying to prove I deserved his love. I was trying to protect my mother's name. That was the line I drew in my own mind, and I held it. The chance came at Thanksgiving. I was 22, final semester of nursing school. Tyler called me out of the blue, the first time in 4 years. Dad's going to the game at noon, he said. Come by, just for 30 minutes. I'll make coffee. I drove to the house in Ray's truck. The neighborhood looked the same. Same cracked sidewalk, same mailbox with the dented flag. Tyler met me at the back door. We sat at the kitchen table. He'd made instant coffee, too strong, in mismatched mugs. We talked about nothing. His job, my clinicals, the weather. Normal words over an abnormal silence. Then the front door opened. Gary stood in the hallway, keys in hand. He looked at me like I was a stain on his floor. What are you doing here? Tyler invited me. Tyler doesn't make decisions in my house. Tyler stood up. Dad, it's Thanksgiving. She's not family, period. The sentence landed like a slap. Not new, not surprising, but hearing it at 22 felt different than hearing it at 10. At 10, it crushed me. At 22, it clarified me. I stood up, reached for my jacket, and on my way out, I picked up the coffee mug Gary had just set on the counter. Still warm. His fingerprints, his saliva, his DNA. I slipped it into my coat pocket and walked out the back door without looking back. Tyler followed me to the truck. "I'm sorry, Dakota. I'm so sorry." I knew he meant it. I also knew he'd never do anything about it. 4 weeks later, the results came in a plain white envelope from the lab. I opened it at Ray's kitchen table on a Tuesday morning before my shift. The apartment was quiet. Ray was already at the shop. Outside, a garbage truck groaned down Kellner Road. I unfolded the letter. Read the numbers. Paternity index, 8,746,291 to 1. Probability of paternity, 99.998%. Gary Ashford is the biological father of Dakota Ashford. I set the paper down. I didn't move for 20 minutes. I'd expected it. Diane's story, my mother's character, the simple math of it. I'd known, somewhere deep, that this would be the answer. But knowing and seeing are two different animals. Knowing lives in your gut, seeing lives on paper, in black ink, with a reference number and a lab logo and a phone number you can call to verify. I cried then. Not the way you cry when you're sad, the way you cry when someone confirms that everything done to you was for nothing. 22 years of being called a stranger's child, 22 years of hand-me-downs and cold rooms and ask your real father. All of it. Every last cruelty, built on a lie that Gary needed to believe because the alternative was looking in the mirror. Ray came home at 6 and found me at the same table, eyes swollen, the letter smoothed flat in front of me. He read it, set it down, pulled out a chair. "I know, kid," he said. "I always knew." "Mom told you?" "Your mother told me she never once stepped outside that marriage. I believed her then. I believe her now." I put the results in an envelope, wrote Gary's name on the front, sealed it, mailed it the next morning. 2 weeks later, it came back. Stamped across the front in red, "Return to sender." He didn't even open it. I put the returned envelope in my nightstand drawer and closed it. I didn't chase him. I didn't call. I didn't beg. Instead, I built a life. I graduated nursing school that May, second in my class. Ray was in the front row, wearing a collared shirt I'd never seen before, clapping like I'd just won the Super Bowl. Nobody else from my family came. I got hired at St. Francis Community Hospital, pediatric ward. 12-hour shifts, rotating nights, more tired than I'd ever been, and more useful than I'd ever felt. I held newborns whose parents were too scared to hold them. I changed dressings on kids who didn't cry because they'd already learned that crying didn't help. I understood those kids. By 26, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a one-bedroom apartment on Linden Street. Nothing fancy. Popcorn ceilings, a radiator that clanked at midnight. But the lease had my name on it. Just mine. That was enough. Meanwhile, Gary stayed Gary. Tyler got married at 25. I wasn't invited. I found out through a Facebook post. Tyler in a rented tux, his bride Jenny smiling wide, Gary standing behind them with his arm around Tyler's shoulder, grinning like a man with no debts. No mention of me, no empty chair, no acknowledgement that the groom had a sister. I scrolled past it, closed my phone, went to work, but the family was starting to notice cracks. A few cousins had reached out to me over the years, tentative, careful. They'd seen my nursing license posted online. They knew I was doing fine without Gary's help, and that quiet success made his story harder to sell. Then, Gary announced his 60th birthday party. 80 guests, catered, a banner and a microphone. He had something planned. I could feel it from 30 miles away. 6 months before that party, my grandmother died. Nana Ashford, 82 years old. Congestive heart failure. She went in her sleep, which was the gentlest thing that ever happened in that family. I didn't go to the funeral. Gary made it clear through Tyler that my presence would cause a scene. I sat in my apartment that night and looked at a photo of Nana holding me as a baby, one of the only pictures I had from that house. In it, she's smiling, but her eyes look like they're carrying something heavier than an infant. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a lawyer's office downtown. Nana had left something for me. Not money, not property. An envelope, sealed, handwritten instructions on the outside, for Dakota only, to be delivered after my passing. I drove to the office on my lunch break. The lawyer, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Pratt, handed me the envelope across a polished desk. "Your grandmother arranged this 8 months ago," she said. She was very specific about the recipient. The envelope was thick. The handwriting on the outside trembled, the pen strokes of a woman whose hands were failing but whose mind was not. I opened it in my car, in the parking garage, with the engine off. Inside was a letter. 3 pages, written in blue ink on lined paper, the kind you'd tear from a spiral notebook. Nana started with an apology. She told me she'd known the truth for almost 30 years. She'd caught Gary with a woman named Karen, in the back seat of his truck, parked behind the VFW hall, 6 months before I was born. Marlene was 7 months pregnant. Gary begged his mother to stay quiet. Nana did. Because he was her son, and she was afraid of losing him. She chose her son over the truth, and she spent the rest of her life living with what that cost. I read the letter 3 times in that parking garage. The second page named dates, places, details no one could fabricate. The VFW hall on Route 9, a Tuesday night in October. Karen worked at the county clerk's office. That's how Gary met her. Nana described the perfume she smelled on Gary's jacket the night she confronted him. Vanilla and something floral, cheap, not Marlene's. The third page was the part that broke me open. Dakota, you were always my granddaughter. You were always Gary's child. Your mother never betrayed anyone. Your father did. And I helped him hide it by staying silent. I am sorry. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But you deserve the truth. Nana had signed it, dated it, and at the bottom, a notary stamp. Mrs. Pratt had witnessed the signature in her office. I called Diane that evening. Nana wrote me a letter, I said. She knew about Karen. Silence. Then, she told you. You knew Nana knew? Marlene suspected. She told me once. She thought Nana had seen something but was too scared of Gary to say it. Diane's voice cracked. Your mother carried that alone, Dakota. She never had proof, just instinct. I sat on my couch with the letter in my lap, the DNA results from my nightstand beside it, and for the first time, I saw the full picture. Gary didn't hate me because I wasn't his. He hated me because I was. And every time he looked at me, he saw Marlene. And every time he saw Marlene, he remembered what he'd done. I wasn't the evidence of her sin. I was the evidence of his. I put both documents into a new envelope, sealed it, set it in my drawer. I wasn't going to find Gary, but if he ever came for me again, I'd be ready. I didn't have to wait long. 3 weeks later, Tyler called. It was a Wednesday night. I was folding scrubs on my bed when my phone lit up with his name, a name I hadn't seen on that screen in over a year. Hey, he said. His voice was low, the way people talk when they're standing in a room with someone who might hear. Hey, Dad's turning 60. There's a party, Saturday the 14th, 80 people. He doesn't want me there, Tyler. I want you there. A pause. You're my sister. Something in my chest seized. In 27 years, Tyler had never said those words out loud, not once. Not in the kitchen when Gary made his remarks. Not at the birthday with the $50 bill, not in any of the silence that followed. Why now? I asked. Because Jenny's pregnant. His voice shook slightly. And I've been thinking about what kind of family I want this kid to grow up in. And it's not what we had. I closed my eyes. Tyler, if I show up, it won't go well. I know, but I'm asking anyway. I thought about it for 3 days, talked to Ray. He listened without interrupting, the way he always does, leaning against the counter, arms crossed, eyes steady. What do you want to do? He asked. I want to go. For Tyler. For Mom. Then go. Will you come? I'll be outside, in the truck, in case you need to leave fast. That was Ray. No speeches, no drama, just a truck with the engine running and a man who'd never once let me down. Saturday morning I got dressed. White blouse, simple earrings, flats. I picked up the envelope from my drawer and slipped it into my bag, just in case. The party was in full swing when I pulled up. Gary's house, the house I grew up in, sat on a quarter-acre lot at the end of Maple Drive. The lawn had been mowed for the occasion. String lights zigzagged between the garage and the fence posts. A folding table by the gate held a cooler, stacks of paper plates, And a sheet cake with Happy 60th Gary piped in blue frosting. I could hear country music from the Bluetooth speaker on the porch, voices layered over each other, the comfortable noise of people who belong somewhere. I parked on the street, checked my bag. The envelope was there, tucked between my wallet and a pack of tissues. Ray's truck was parked 2 houses down, engine off, windows cracked. He caught my eye in the side mirror and gave me a single nod. I walked through the gate. The backyard was full. 80 people, give or take. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, guys from Gary's plumbing crew, women from the church. Kids ran between legs. Someone was grilling burgers. The air smelled like charcoal and cheap beer and cut grass. A few heads turned when I walked in. Conversations stuttered. An aunt whose name I'd forgotten leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered something behind her hand. Tyler met me at the gate. He looked like he hadn't slept. "You came," he said. "I came." He led me to a chair at the far end of the last table, the one closest to the back fence, farthest from the main gathering. I sat down, set my bag on my lap. Then I looked up and found Gary's eyes across the yard. He was standing at the head table, beer in hand, surrounded by friends. His smile disappeared the second he saw me. And I understood, right then, that this was never going to be a quiet evening. For the first hour, Gary pretended I wasn't there. He worked the crowd the way he always did. Handshake, backslap, laugh, repeat. He was good at this. He'd spent 60 years learning how to fill a room with a version of himself that people wanted to believe in. The hard-working plumber, the devoted father, the man who sacrificed everything for his family. It was a convincing performance. It always had been. Around 7 o'clock, someone clinked a glass. The music faded. Gary walked to the center of the yard where a microphone stand had been set up next to the cake table. He tapped the mic twice. The crowd gathered in a loose semicircle. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he said. 60 years. Can't believe it. Laughter. Applause. He talked about his life, his work, how he'd built his crew from nothing, how he'd raised his family in this very house, on this very lawn. He gestured around the yard, and people nodded. Then he called Tyler up. Tyler walked to the microphone slowly, hands in his pockets. Gary put his arm around him and pulled him close. "This is my boy," Gary said into the mic. "My only boy. My legacy." He said it with the warmth of a father and the precision of a surgeon. My only boy, not my oldest, not one of my kids. My only. A few guests glanced in my direction. I kept my face still. "Some of you know," Gary continued, and his voice shifted, lower, more deliberate. "My first wife made choices I had to live with for 18 years. He paused, let it land. "I won't go into detail, but tonight, I want to make something official." He looked out at the crowd with the calm authority of a man who believed he'd already won. "This house," Gary said, one hand on Tyler's shoulder, the other gripping the mic. "Everything I built, it goes to Tyler, because family means blood. Real blood." Applause. Scattered, uncertain, but enough. A few of the plumbing crew guys whooped. A neighbor clapped too hard. Then Marcus, my cousin, standing near the cooler, said what no one else would. "What about Dakota?" It came out quiet, but the microphone caught the silence after it. Gary heard. His head turned slowly toward Marcus, then toward me. He smiled. The kind of smile that isn't a smile at all. "Dakota?" He chuckled into the mic. "She's here as a guest tonight, not as my daughter." The yard went still. Someone set down a plate. A child's voice carried from somewhere near the house, unaware. But Gary wasn't finished. He looked directly at me. Across 80 people. Across 29 years. And he said the thing he'd been rehearsing his whole life. "I kept my mouth shut for years, out of respect for her mother's memory." His voice was steady, practiced. "But since she decided to show up tonight, everyone deserves the truth. She was never mine." I felt every pair of eyes in that yard land on me. Diane Mercer, sitting at the next table, reached over and put her hand on my shoulder. Her fingers pressed hard. A message. "I'm here." I sat perfectly still. My hands were under the table, gripping the strap of my bag. My heart hammered so loud, I was sure the woman next to me could hear it, but my face didn't move. Because I'd been waiting for this, not hoping for it, not planning it, but prepared, The way you prepare for a storm when you've watched the sky turn dark for 29 years. Gary smiled at the crowd, triumphant. He had no idea what was in my bag. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the patio stone, a small sound that cut through the silence like a blade. Every head turned. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I spoke the way I speak to a parent at the hospital when I'm delivering results they didn't expect. Clear, measured, respectful. Gary, you've spent 29 years telling that story. I paused. Let the sentence breathe. Can I have 60 seconds to tell mine? His smile faltered, just slightly, a crack in the plaster. He shrugged, gestured with the beer bottle. Go ahead. Won't change the facts. Thank you. I opened my bag, pulled out the envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, worn at the edges from years in a drawer. Gary's name was written across the front in my handwriting, the same handwriting from 7 years ago, the same envelope he'd mailed back without opening. I held it up so the people near the front could see. Some of you might not know this, I said, but 7 years ago I mailed this envelope to Gary. He sent it back, unopened, returned to sender. I turned it so the red stamp was visible. He didn't want to know what was inside. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Gary's jaw tightened. What is that? He said. This is what you were too afraid to open. I broke the seal. The paper tore cleanly. Inside were 2 documents folded together. I separated them, held the first one up. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. My whole body was a straight line drawn through 29 years of being told I didn't count. I'm going to read 1 paragraph, I said, and then I'm going to leave, and you can decide for yourselves what's true. 80 people held their breath. I unfolded the DNA results and read them out loud. Paternity test conducted by Mid-State Genomics Laboratory, dated March 14, 2019. Sample A, cheek swab, Dakota Ashford. Sample B, saliva trace, Gary Ashford. I looked up. Gary's face was locked. The beer bottle in his hand had stopped halfway to his mouth. Paternity index, 8,746,291 to 1. Combined probability of paternity, 99.998%. I lowered the paper. Gary Ashford is the biological father of Dakota Ashford. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, packed tight with the sound of 80 people recalculating everything they'd been told for the last 3 decades. Somewhere near the back, a spoon hit a plate. Someone inhaled sharply. A woman I didn't know covered her mouth with her hand. Gary spoke first. Of course he did. That's fake. His voice was flat, controlled, but the color was draining from his face like water from a tub. She fabricated it. I held the paper toward Marcus, who was standing closest. Lab name, phone number, and case reference number are printed at the bottom. Call them right now if you want. Marcus took the paper, read it slowly, looked up at Gary. It's from Mid-State, Gary. It's legit. I don't care where it's from. The reference number is right here. Anyone with a phone can verify it in 5 minutes. Gary's mouth opened, closed, opened again. This doesn't prove anything, he said. But his voice had changed. The command was gone. What was left sounded thin, hollow, like a man standing on a floor that had just started to crack. I didn't argue with him. I didn't need to. The paper was doing the work. I reached into the envelope for the second document. The DNA is only half of it, I said. I unfolded the second document. 3 pages of lined paper covered in shaky blue handwriting. The crowd leaned in, the way people do when they sense the ground is about to shift again. This is a letter, I said. Written by Nana, your mother, Gary. Written 3 months before she died. Notarized by her attorney. Something crossed Gary's face. Not anger. Something older. Fear. My mother wouldn't. She did. I didn't read the whole letter. That wasn't mine to share. I read 2 sentences. The only 2 that mattered. I caught Gary with a woman named Karen behind the VFW hall in October, 6 months before Dakota was born. Marlene never cheated. My son did, and I stayed silent because I was a coward. The yard erupted. Not in noise, in motion. People shifted in their chairs. Hands went to mouths. Eyes darted between Gary and me like spectators at a wreck they couldn't look away from. Gary grabbed the edge of the table. His knuckles were white. She was confused, he said. She was old, she was sick. Diane Mercer stood up from her chair, slowly, deliberately. Every person in that yard watched her rise. She wasn't confused, Gary. Diane's voice was clear and unshaking. I was there too. Marlene cried on my couch for 3 hours the night she found out about Karen. She never once thought about leaving you. But you never stopped punishing her for what you did. The microphone was still on. Every word carried. Tyler, who had been standing beside Gary this whole time, took one step back. Then another. His face was white. His mouth was a thin line. He hadn't known about any of it. What happened next was the saddest part. Not because I felt sorry for Gary, because I watched a man try to save a lie that had already died, and he couldn't stop himself. "This is my birthday!" Gary shouted. His hand slammed the table. Paper plates jumped. A cup of soda tipped over, and nobody picked it up. "You planned this. You came here to destroy—" "I came because Tyler asked me to. She's trying to get the house. She's been scheming. I don't want your house, Gary." My voice was level. I made sure of that. "I have my own home. I pay my own rent. I don't need anything from you." He looked around the yard, searching for an ally, for someone to nod, to step forward, to say she's lying, but every face he found was either looking away or looking through him. Marcus set the DNA paper on the table, folded his arms. Aunt Patty was crying, quietly, into a napkin. A man from Gary's plumbing crew, I didn't know his name, put down his plate and walked toward the gate without a word. Then Tyler spoke. "Dad," his voice cracked. "Is it true? About Karen?" The whole yard held still. Gary looked at his son, his golden child, the one he'd built his entire identity around. And for one moment, I thought he might tell the truth. I thought 30 years of lies might finally collapse under their own weight. But Gary just stood there, jaw working, eyes wet, saying nothing. And that silence, that refusal to deny it when it mattered most, was louder than any confession. Tyler's hand dropped from his father's shoulder. "That's what I thought," Tyler whispered. Gary was still standing, but everything underneath him had already fallen. I could have stopped there. The DNA was red. The letter was out. The silence had spoken. But Gary had asked one question for 29 years, and I decided, standing in that yard with 80 witnesses and a fold of paper in my hand, that he deserved an answer. "You always wanted to know who my real father is," I said. Gary's eyes snapped to mine. "He's standing right outside." I pointed toward the front of the house. Through the side gate, past the driveway, you could see the street. And there, parked under the elm tree, was Ray's blue Ford pickup. And there, leaning against the driver's side door with his arms crossed, was Uncle Ray. He wasn't trying to make an entrance. He was just there, steady, the way he'd been for 11 years. Gary moved to the edge of the yard and looked through the gate. When he saw Ray, something drained from his face, the last trace of color, the last thread of authority. He looked like a man watching his own house burn from across the street. "Ray taught me to drive," I said. "Ray paid for nursing school. Ray showed up every Christmas you didn't." I folded the documents, placed them on the table in front of Gary's empty chair. "DNA says you're my father, but Ray is my dad." The envelope sat on the table between a paper plate and an untouched slice of cake. "Keep these," I said. "This time, try opening them." I picked up my bag, smoothed my blouse, and walked toward the gate. Behind me I heard a chair scrape, then another. Aunt Patty's footsteps followed mine. Diane was already at the gate, holding it open. Marcus nodded as I passed. Didn't say anything. Didn't have to. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just walked. Out of that yard, down the driveway, into the rest of my life. Ray opened the passenger door before I reached the truck. I climbed in. He closed it behind me. Walked around to the driver's side. Got in. Started the engine. Neither of us spoke for 2 blocks. The street was quiet. Porch lights clicked on as the evening darkened. A sprinkler hissed somewhere on a lawn we'd already passed. "You okay?" Ray said, eyes on the road. "I'm done," I said, Finally, I'm done. He nodded, reached over and turned on the radio. Low. Some country station playing a song I didn't know. Pedal steel and a quiet voice singing about a long way home. And then I cried. Not the way I cried in Ray's kitchen at 22, when the DNA results first came back. That was grief. This was different. This was the sound of something heavy being set down after carrying it so long your arms forgot what empty felt like. I cried for my mother, who never got to defend herself. For Nana, who tried to make it right too late. For the 10-year-old girl on the stairs who heard her father call her no one. For the 18-year-old who baked her own birthday cake and got a $50 bill thrown in her face. I cried for all of them. And then I stopped. Ray didn't ask me to explain. Didn't offer wisdom or a pep talk. He just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the console between us, close enough to reach if I needed it. When we pulled into the parking lot behind his shop, he killed the engine and sat for a moment. You said what needed to be said, he told me. That's enough. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, looked at the staircase leading up to the apartment where I'd rebuilt my life. Yeah, I said. It is. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote an email. Not to Gary, to Mrs. Pratt, the attorney who'd handled Nana's letter. I kept it short. 3 paragraphs. Professional. I stated that I had no interest in Gary's property, his savings, or any form of inheritance. I was not filing a lawsuit. I was not pursuing any legal claim. I wanted exactly one thing. That Gary stop repeating the story that Marlene Ashford confessed to infidelity. Because there was now documented evidence, a DNA test, and a notarized letter from his own mother, proving that story was false. If the story continued to circulate, I reserved the right to share both documents more broadly. This was not a threat. It was a boundary. Mrs. Pratt forwarded the email to Gary's contact on file. I never received a response. That same week, I mailed photocopies of the DNA results to every family member whose address I had. 12 envelopes total. Each one included a brief note on a single index card. I am not asking anyone to choose a side. I am only asking that you know the truth. My mother, Marlene Ashford, was faithful. The enclosed documents confirm this. If you have questions, the lab's number is on the letterhead. I signed each card with my name. No anger, no pleading, just fact. Then I blocked Gary's phone number. Not because I hated him, because I was finished having a conversation that only went one direction. Ray watched me seal the last envelope from across the kitchen. That's it? He asked. That's it. No court? No lawyers? I don't need a judge to tell me who I am. He almost smiled. Almost. Your mother would have said the same thing. That was the best compliment anyone had ever given me. Tyler called 1 week later. It was late, almost 11. I was on the couch in my apartment, half watching a baking show on mute, when his name lit up my screen. Hey. Hey. His voice sounded hollowed out, like someone had taken a melon baller to everything behind his words. Did you know, he asked, about Karen, before Nana's letter? No, not until the letter. A long breath. I've been looking stuff up. I called the lab. The DNA is real. I know. He won't talk to me. He's been locked in his room since the party. Won't answer the phone. Won't come to the shop. I didn't say I'm sorry, because I wasn't sure what I'd be apologizing for. The party ended right after you left, Tyler continued. Half the guests walked out within 10 minutes. Dad sat at the head table by himself until it got dark. I had to go out and bring the food inside. He didn't move. I pictured it. Gary alone at a decorated table, surrounded by empty chairs and string lights buzzing in the dark. I waited for satisfaction to arrive. It didn't. Just a dull ache in a place I thought had scarred over. Tyler, you don't have to choose between us. I know. But I'm done pretending. I know that too. There was a pause. Then Tyler's voice shifted, softer, almost shy. Jenny's due in 4 months. It's a girl. My hand tightened on the phone. Jenny told me something last week, he said. She said, if you ever treat our daughter the way your father treated Dakota, I will walk out that door and never come back. He was crying now, quietly, the way men cry when they've only just learned how. I want her to know her aunt, Dakota. She will, I said. I promise. The fallout didn't come in a wave. It came like leaks, slow, steady, impossible to plug. Within 2 weeks of the party, 3 men from Gary's plumbing crew quit. All 3 had known Marlene. One of them, a guy named Dennis who'd been with Gary for 11 years, told Tyler on his way out, "I can't work for a man who'd do that to his own kid." Gary's crew went from 6 to 3 overnight. He lost a commercial contract with a property management company because he couldn't staff the job. Money didn't dry up, but it shrank. And in a small town, when your crew walks out, people notice. The church noticed too. Gary had been a deacon at Grace Hill Community for 15 years. Not a role that pays, a role that matters. It meant he read scripture on Sundays, organized the food drive in November, shook hands in the lobby. Pastor Collins called Gary in for a private meeting. I don't know what was said. But the following Sunday, Gary's name was missing from the bulletin. A woman named Linda read the scripture instead. Neighbors adjusted. The Hendersons, Barb and Tom, both in their 70s, who'd lived next door since before I was born, brought a tin of cookies to Ray's shop one afternoon. "For Dakota," Barb said, pressing the tin into Ray's hands. "Marlene was the kindest woman on this street. We should have said something sooner." Ray put the cookies on the kitchen table that night. I ate 3 and cried a little, because sometimes kindness hits harder than cruelty. Marcus posted something short on Facebook. Truth has a way of finding daylight. He didn't tag anyone, he didn't have to. The comment section filled up within an hour. Gary didn't leave his house for 2 weeks. A month after the party, a letter arrived at Ray's shop. Hand-delivered by Tyler, not mailed. My name was on the front in Gary's handwriting. Blocky, all caps, the penmanship of a man who writes work orders, not apologies. I opened it at the counter while Ray rebuilt a carburetor 3 feet away, pretending not to watch. The letter was short, 6 sentences. "Dakota, I know things got out of hand. I made mistakes. The house is still your home if you want it. Come back so we can talk. Dad." I read it twice, looking for the word, the only word that would have mattered. It wasn't there. No sorry, no I was wrong, no acknowledgement of what he'd done, not the lie, not Karen, not the 18 years of erasure, not the $50 bill, not the speech in front of 80 people, just mistakes, passive, unnamed, floating in the air like smoke from someone else's fire. And come home, as if I'd been the one who left, as if the door was always open and I simply chose not to walk through it, as if the problem was geography and not 30 years of cruelty. I folded the letter, put it in the drawer next to the returned envelope, closed the drawer. Ray looked up from the carburetor. "You okay with that?" "I will be." That same week, Tyler came to visit me, first time ever at my apartment. He brought an ultrasound photo, a grainy black and white image of a baby girl curled like a comma. He stood in my kitchen, awkward and too tall for the space, and held it out. "We're naming her Marlene," he said. I took the photo, held it with both hands. "Does Gary know?" "Yeah." "What did he say?" "Nothing. He didn't say anything at all." Some silences are confessions. That one was. 3 months passed. The sharpest edges softened. Not into forgiveness, but into distance. And distance, I've learned, is its own kind of mercy. I kept working at St. Francis. Morning shifts, mostly. The pediatric ward is the kind of place that resets your perspective every 12 hours. You hold a 3-day-old baby who just had heart surgery, and suddenly your own problems feel survivable. One morning, a newborn wrapped her entire fist around my index finger and wouldn't let go. I stood there, beside the incubator, for 5 minutes. Just breathing. Just being held by something that small. After my shift, I drove to Ray's shop, the way I did most afternoons. We ate lunch at his workbench, turkey sandwiches, Lay's chips, 2 cans of ginger ale, surrounded by engine parts and the smell of WD-40. "Your birthday's next month," Ray said, wiping mustard off his thumb. 30, the big one. What do you want to do?" I thought about it. "Bake a cake," I said. "A real one. Invite Tyler and Jenny. Invite Diane. Invite Patty and Marcus. Blow out the candles. Actually blow them out this time. Ray smiled. A real one. The kind that crinkled the skin around his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. Finally get to do it right, he said. Yeah, finally. I looked up at the wall behind the kitchen table. The $50 bill was there, framed in a cheap black frame from the dollar store. I'd hung it the week I moved in. Not out of bitterness. Out of memory. That bill was the price Gary put on me. $50 for 29 years of a daughter he refused to claim. I was worth more than that. I'd always been worth more than that. I just needed a while to believe it. If you're listening to this story and you have a Gary in your life, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't know your situation. I don't know what you've survived or what you're surviving right now. I don't know if your Gary is your father, your mother, a sibling, a spouse, or someone else who decided you weren't enough and spent years making sure you believed it. But I know this. You don't owe loyalty to someone just because you share DNA. Blood doesn't earn trust. Behavior does. And the people who love you, really love you, are the ones who show up without being begged, without conditions, without keeping score. My mother couldn't protect me anymore. She ran out of time. Nana knew the truth for 3 decades, but was too afraid to speak. Tyler loved me, but didn't have the courage to stand up until the walls were already falling down. Uncle Ray had no obligation. None. I wasn't his daughter by law, by blood, by any document you could file. He was just a man with a spare room and a decision. Show up or don't. He showed up every single day. When I couldn't sleep. When I failed my first clinical exam. When I sat in his kitchen at 22, crying over a DNA result that confirmed what he already knew. He never said, "I'm your father now." He didn't have to. He just was. I didn't win because of a piece of paper. I won because I stopped letting one man's lie define my worth. The DNA didn't set me free. Deciding I was done, that set me free. Setting a boundary isn't revenge. It's the first time you choose yourself. If nobody's told you that today, I'm telling you now. So here's where things stand. I'm 29, about to turn 30. I still work the pediatric ward at St. Francis. I still eat lunch at Ray's workbench on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He still makes the sandwiches too thick. And I still don't complain. Tyler calls me every Sunday. It's the first real relationship we've ever had, not built on a shared house or a shared father, but on the simple choice to pick up the phone. Jenny sends me photos of her growing belly. The nursery is painted soft yellow. There's a name stenciled on the wall in white cursive letters. Marlene. Baby Marlene was born 2 months ago, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, at 3:47 in the morning. I was in the waiting room. Tyler came through the double doors, scrubs wrinkled, eyes red, grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. "You want to hold her?" I held my niece. She had dark hair like mine, like our mother's. Diane and Patty were at the hospital too. Diane brought flowers. Patty brought the blanket she'd crocheted in secret. We stood around Jenny's bed and passed that baby from arm to arm, and for a few minutes, we were the kind of family Marlene would have wanted. Gary? I don't know. I don't ask. Tyler doesn't bring it up, and I don't push. I heard through Marcus that he's still in the house on Maple Drive. Alone. Not broke, just empty. The $50 bill is still framed on my wall. I see it every morning when I make coffee. It reminds me where I started. It reminds me what someone thought I was worth. It reminds me they were wrong. My name is Dakota Ashford. I am my father's daughter, just not the father who threw me out. If Dakota's story reminded you of someone, or of yourself, drop a comment and tell me, what boundary did you finally set? I read every single one. If you want more stories like this, check the links in the description. There's a whole playlist waiting for you. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for being here, truly. I'll see you in the next story.